pick up the story from there. Tell us a little bit about yourself so our viewers will know.
It wasn't a subject that we talked about. And when I look back now, I was depressed for a while after I got Marty's diagnosis. I have to tell you, it was always our dream to get you to be our MC.
Oh.
We are fighting a lot of disinformation.
You're such a formidable woman.
Thank you, my friend.
I was going to say, glad to call you friend. Welcome to The Conversation with Pat Harvey. I'm Pat Harvey. And in this new series, I'll dive into various topics and issues with my guests in a more intimate and unfiltered setting. And I'm happy to say that my first guest is civil rights attorney Ariva Martin. She is also the founder of the Special Needs Network and, have to say, a longtime friend. Ariva, thank you so much for being here.
Well, I am so honored that I am your first guest on this beautiful set and this amazing program called The Conversation with Pat Harvey. So thank you for having me.
Well, Ariva, for all of our conversations that we've had over the years, I know you. I know you were born in St. Louis into a family of strong, compassionate women. But pick up the story from there. Tell us a little bit about yourself so our viewers will know.
Yeah, Pat, I did. I grew up in North St. Louis, and I'm very proud of that. Grew up in a housing project. A lot of people may not know what that is, but this is a big, grand experiment by the government to house people who were essentially poor. And some say it was successful, others say it was a complete disaster. Many of these communities became replete with crime and drugs and a really toxic environment for a lot of folks. But for me, I had these amazing, strong Black women, not what society would call successful, not educated, didn't have fancy jobs or fancy titles, but they had a lot of heart, had a lot of grit, and they were determined to give me so much of what they didn't have. And that meant going to a Catholic elementary school, a Catholic high school, and then my godmother, who was a janitor, using her very, very meager salary. She worked as a maid in the mornings and a janitor at night. Used that money to help send me to college. I won several scholarships to go to the University of Chicago and then went on to Harvard Law School. So I have nothing but admiration for my community, and my community is called The Village, and I like to call it out because they're friends that I'm still in contact with to this day. So I like to tell people it doesn't matter where you start, right? You get to write your story, and your ending far more important, and the journey along the way. So that's my St. Louis story. I love it. I go back all the time. So I have relatives there.
You do.
I do.
And you're back and forth in New York because of your daughters.
Yes.
Who are also going to be attorneys, or also are attorneys, like you, following in your footsteps.
Yes, 2 daughters. We, on social media, we use the hashtag, the Law Chicks.
I love it.
And I couldn't be prouder of them. My 2 daughters both had dreams of being professional tennis players. So they had very unconventional, upbringing. They grew up going to homeschool when it wasn't really that popular to do so. Michael left traditional school at 4th grade because of the practices and because of the grueling nature of that junior, semi-pro tennis circuit is so grueling. She was in for a while at a camp. When she was not even a teenager, she went, left home and went to the summer camp in Florida. Wow. But both had...
Well, there she is. That Michael?
That's me.
Oh, is that you? That's you, Ariva.
That's me, and that's me graduating from law school. That little girl with her hand up looking so serious, that's a picture of me. But both daughters had career-ending injuries, and it was really tough for them.
Michael and Morgan?
Yes, Michael, her back and her shoulder, and Morgan, her knee.
All right.
And so it was difficult for them. They had to accept that their dreams of playing doubles together at Wimbledon and being on the circuit together as the Martin sisters wasn't going to happen. But look at God, Pat, because they ended up becoming the first ever siblings to attend Columbia University business and law school together.
That's
so they're both
terrific.
pursuing joint degrees as legal degrees and graduate school business degrees, and they were the first sisters there at the same time pursuing those 2 degrees.
So they have trailblazed already. Like
Yes, they figured out how to pivot from that tennis dream to do something that they're equally passionate about, which is the law. And let me just tell you, my husband's a lawyer too.
Yeah, I know.
So they grew up in a household where, you know, we talked a lot about the legal career, and we have a lot of friends, to be honest, who are doctors and lawyers, and their children wanted nothing to do with their careers. So we are really sometimes shocked that.
Well, that says a lot about you two, though. Seriously, because you're right. There are so many children that don't necessarily want to follow in the exact same footsteps. And I'm interested, how did you get the girls from their dream? Well, they had the injuries, so that did a lot, obviously, to curtail that, you know, the achievements that they would have liked to made in sports or what have you. But so you convinced them, or did you convince them?
You know, they always wanted to ensure, well, they were clear that they needed a backup plan. They had watched so many athletes have career-ending injuries that didn't pursue their education and then had to go back to school at a later point in time or had to figure out some career. So it was very important to them, even as they were pursuing tennis, that they did make education also very important. So Michael graduated valedictorian of her high school class. They both were summa cum laude graduates from college. Morgan's going to be an honors graduate from Columbia University. So education. Look, we are, in some ways, a very typical Black family that, you know, grew up with parents who weren't educated, but parents who taught us, being my husband and I, the importance of education. So we instill that in our kids very early on. So I don't think the law was a big pivot. I think having to face that their dreams, though, of playing tennis, that was tough. That was really tough. And Michael talks very openly about it, some of the depression that she experienced, some of the, just the emotional part of having to give up something that she had worked. So, I mean, this is a girl that was up at 5 in the morning on the road from LA to Lancaster, the discipline, the hard work on that tennis court, sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And gave up a lot of what kids traditionally do. I mean, all the things that you know, the social things that happen in school, a lot of those things she didn't have. So, I mean, that was her life. And it's kind of hard to think of an 11-year-old having a career, but, you know, at 11 and 12, that had become pretty much her life. So I give them a lot of credit for being able to make that shift emotionally. And if anybody that's ever played sports or has ever been involved in competitive sports, they know the kind of commitment that it takes.
Exactly, the time. So they had to be good, putting in all that time.
They were good.
Yeah,
they were good, and they were committed, and they were hard workers, which is what I was really proud of. And they wrote about their tennis dreams and all the things that sports taught them as they were applying to college and then on to graduate school. So it wasn't for naught. You know, they learned so many important lessons about life,
question.
You know, about determination, about grit.
And they could probably still play tennis, just not not competitively.
Yes, definitely not competitively, and just team sports and you know, how to set your sights on a goal.
Correct.
And, you know, the perseverance that it takes. So I think they look back with some fond memories of those days, as much as it was also pretty grueling.
Well, Ariva, what made you want to go into law?
Yeah, you know, Pat, people ask me that a lot. And my first memories of being in that housing project was when I started going to this high school, my high school, Rosati Kane High School, seeing the disparities. I rode a bus from my neighborhood to where this high school was. And St. Louis is a pretty small town, but I had to ride on this bus through some very wealthy neighborhoods. And then when I was younger, I would go with my godmother to her jobs, her night jobs as a janitor. And we'd go to these big office buildings in the county of St. Louis, and I would see these just amazing offices, these big desks, and I would wonder, who works here? Who are these people? You know, they have the honor and the privilege to come to these offices and work. And as I would see the changing of the neighborhoods, something would always, you know, it made me uncomfortable, and it made me ask a lot of questions like, why am I struggling?
The differences.
The differences. And then I got to school with kids and I realized they didn't have they weren't any better than me. Now, their parents owned homes that were a block long, you know, and they had chauffeurs and maids and drivers. But at the heart of it, they were just kids like I was just a kid. So that, I think, was the beginning of me thinking about how do I do something that impacts what I am living and what I am experiencing.
And boy, have you done that. So this is all started at a young age, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I want to pivot a bit to what you are doing, or what you have been doing for almost 2 decades now. We know May is Mental Health Awareness Month. You opened the Center for Autism and Developmental Disabilities in the fall of 2023 within the Martin Luther King Jr. campus in Watts, Willowbrook. I know that was a dream that you have had, because experiencing the Pink Pump Affair, Evening Under the Stars, this is why those events happened, to raise funds to open this center. So I know how important that it was for you being involved with these fundraisers and the effort, the work that you put into it. We're going to talk more about Pink Pump, because that's coming up, but the inspiration behind this is another just incredible story of love. Marty, I'll let you share.
Yeah, my son, I have 3 kids, and Marty is my youngest, and Marty was diagnosed with autism when he was about 2 years old. And, you know, Pat, when you think you kind of have arrived somewhere, I don't even know where I thought I had arrived, but I thought I had figured out a lot about life.
Sure.
And Marty's diagnosis of autism happened when my mother was dying.
That's when you found out. So you had to deal with knowing that your mother was getting ready to pass, and then you get this diagnosis about Marty having this disease that you probably didn't know much about.
Nothing.
Right?
Honestly, I'd never even heard of it.
I was going to say.
I had not even met a single solitary person who shared with me that their child had autism. Had seen magazine covers or stories here and there, but had no clue.
So what did you do? How did you deal? You knew you had to do something.
It was tough. It was really, really tough. Talk about May being Mental Health Month. I, too, grew up in a community where we didn't talk a lot about mental health.
Right.
I don't think I met anyone that had a therapist until I moved to California, and everybody had a therapist, a trainer, a cook. not in my neighborhood.
I know what you're saying.
It wasn't a subject that we talked about. And when I look back now, I was depressed for a while after I got Marty's diagnosis. Like I said, I'm living on one coast, my mother's living on the other coast, but I'm managing her health. So I'm constantly on the phones with her doctors. I'm sending caregivers. I'm bringing her to California. I'm trying to get her to move to California. Anybody ever have a sick parent and know how difficult managing the care of
Especially
your parent
when they're
is?
far away.
You are still their child.
Yes.
And no matter what, you can't order them around. You can't make them do anything. And I so wanted my mother to move to Los Angeles. We brought her out here, and we thought we could just convince her. And she stayed a while, and she
wanted to be at home.
I want to go home.
In her environment, her surrounding.
Her environment.
Yes.
And after arguing over, you know, I had to give in. I had to say, I have to let you manage your health. And so that was a very big issue. And she did pass as we were getting the diagnosis. And I remember coming back from St. Louis. We buried her in St. Louis, her hometown. And just sitting at a cafe on Larchmont by myself, just thinking, now what?
I was going to say, you went from one situation that's so just incredibly sad, regardless of the relationship that you had in terms of being very loving and her towards you, but to be faced with something that was so different and so new, that had to be terribly frightening. What did you do next? I mean, did you know who to talk to?
I didn't. I just knew we had more questions than we had answers. As I couldn't say the word autism for a long time, Pat.
Because you didn't believe it. You didn't want this to be true.
I couldn't say it. Just I would weep.
Oh.
So there are moments still when I'm talking to audiences about being an autism advocate, I kind of chuckle sometimes, like, Y'all
How far
think this is easy. Like y'all, you need to have seen me right after that diagnosis. It was about probably a year. So I would say he had a speech delay. I would say that, you know, he has sensory issues. I had all kinds of creative ways to talk about it, words and language to describe it, but I would not use that word autism.
Was that to make you feel better about it?
I think, as I said, I was going through a period of depression and I wasn't getting help. I was thinking, you know, I had my cape on, thought I could handle it on my own. And it took me a while to, I had to channel. I channeled that godmother, her name is Ethel, her name was Ethel, and my grandmother, Devan. I had to start thinking, like, what would they do? What would they do? And I knew what they wouldn't do. They wouldn't do what I was doing. They wouldn't do what I was doing.
Worry.
They would not be paralyzed. They wouldn't let fear of the unknown overtake them. They would get into action. And that's something about thinking about, like, what would they say? They would say, girl, that boy is okay. Find him a school. Find him they would just tell me to start doing stuff, right? And that's
Move. Get moving.
Do what you know how to do. And one thing I knew how to do as a lawyer was research.
Yes.
I had a law firm. I have a law firm. So I knew people I could call. So I could get resources, I could get information. So I just started, and it led me someplace I didn't know where it was going to lead me. I was just a mother on a mission to find a school, to find educational support, to find doctors, to find interventionists. I was just on a mission to do what every parent who gets that diagnosis eventually, some are able to do it on day one. Some, like me, may be 6 months in, a year in, but eventually you have to get moving.
Well, it's because of people like you that people are able to do something on day one. I'm just going to say that because I've witnessed it. Once you decided, though, to do your research, to get moving, to do something about it, to find out more information, you also discovered something else, Ariva. In Black and brown communities, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that.
I went from anguish, and at one point I was angry. I got mad. I got mad because I realized that there were people who looked like me that had so much less. And this is when I had that realization. I took a class over in South LA, and it was a class that was happening at like 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm driving, I'm self-employed, I can leave, I didn't have to report to anyone. I would get to the class, and there were a bunch of parents there, Black parents, who had quit their jobs to be at this class. And they started asking me questions about services, and they thought I had the answers because they learned I was a lawyer, but I was just learning a lot myself. But I had figured out how to get Marty services. And what I would hear from them about how little they had for their kids, that's what made me angry. Like, you mean to tell me there are other Black families like mine that look like me, that are from communities like the one I grew up in, that have kids with autism, and they don't even have, you know, 1/10 of what I've been fighting for in terms of services for Marty? And that really angered me. And that's, when I think about the impetus of all the work I do, it was that. And if my godmother and grandmother wanted me to do anything, it would be to stand up for, give a voice to, and to advocate for those families. And that is what I have been so privileged and honored to do for now almost 2 decades.
And you know, Ariva, you also discovered that even in their communities, or our communities, those services weren't there. So imagine a family having to get on a bus, possibly being able to get an appointment out of their area to even have access to these services. Then along comes Ariva Martin with her light bulb going off, and you're thinking, I want to do something where people can go where they are and get the
Yes.
services they need. Is this how Pink Pump came to be?
This is how Pink Pump came to be. This is how that Autism Center came to be.
We're going to get there.
Yeah, no.
I know that's
Pat,
why.
I was literally driving. One summer, I drove to Santa Barbara once a week to take Marty to see some therapists. I would be on the road at 6 o'clock. We wouldn't get to Santa Barbara till almost 10. We would stay until about 4. And you could imagine the traffic coming back. We would get home around 8 o'clock. And again, self-employed, able to take a whole day off work and do that. And if I wasn't going to Santa Barbara, I was going to the San Fernando Valley or the West Valley, fighting that traffic. So a 50-minute appointment sometimes would take you 2.5 to 3 hours
just to get there.
To get there and to get back. And that's not possible. That's just not even feasible for most people. And that made me angry. That made me mad, fighting that traffic, thinking about how are people doing this? And something else I did, Pat, I don't do it much anymore, but I started representing families in IEP meetings and going to represent them, oftentimes pro bono. And I would go into South LA and would fight with administrators and school staff about services for kids. Then I have my families that I was representing, some who were in the Valley or on the West Side, and they would throw so many services at the kids they couldn't even use them.
Oh, really?
I had to stop. I was emotionally, I would leave those IEP meetings so drained. But we started a disability rights practice in my firm. We started doing IEP meetings. We started representing families in discrimination cases, disability discrimination cases in state and federal court. Because I just realized there were so many families whose children, whose families have been discriminated against, who have been denied access to services. It's a part of our healthcare system. We talk a whole lot about mental health system, our primary care system, just the disparities and the lack of access and the lack of really high quality resources in underserved communities. And it's the same when you look at autism.
I was going to say, and still exists today.
Still
so
exists
all
today.
of that moved you. I want to have to share some pictures from Pink Pump with our viewers. This is when you talk about how angry you were. Folks, to go to any of these events is just amazing. I mean, I remember when you first started out and how it has grown. So tell me about Pink Pump. Well, tell the viewers about Pink Pump.
So Pink Pump is this amazing event with beautiful folks like Pat Harvey. And I have to tell you, it was always our dream to get you to be our MC.
Oh.
And I met you formally at Stephanie's Day on the lot of CBS during an autism, event. And I was just, when you said yes, I can't tell you how ecstatic we were, and that you have said yes every year that we have asked you. It's just so incredible, and we are so grateful to you. But yeah, it's a fashion show, it's musical performances, it's people, women and some good men who come together to help us raise money for kids. A lot of the proceeds from the Pink Pump Gala go to support our Camp JPAC, which is the summer camp. It's the only fully inclusive summer camp that's offered to parents free of charge during the summer. And we have been raising money for this camp now for, I don't know, close to 15 years. And the camp is where kids get to meet friends and have unique experiences. We get to hire summer camp counselors and teach high school and college students about how to be more accepting, how to interact with neurodivergent children and teenagers. So it's this amazing camp that we are so proud of. And this year, Pat, because of the devastating Altadena fire, some of the proceeds from Pink Pump will also benefit families that we have adopted. We've adopted close to 200 families whose homes were lost or whose lives have been disrupted because of the Altadena fires. We want to make sure that those families are given support, given love, given financial resources and other resources that they need. So this year, Pink Pump has an extra special meaning because it's Camp JPAC, but it's also fire victims.
You do so much. And I must say, what draw me, the first time I went, I think I may have brought my sister to that one.
Yes.
It was a special
Michelle has been there.
But it's just watching the work that you do, and I do remember going to camp
JPAC.
to watch what some of the services for the children, but just your sincerity in that moment or those few hours that everyone is together. I know what it's going for. And I want you to talk a little bit about the center, because when you opened that a couple of years ago, I said, oh my God, this is her dream. I went to see it without a camera because I wanted to witness for myself, just to see, here's somebody that you know, or you've seen talking about a dream for years.
Yes.
And then it came true. And it's just amazing. You're doing amazing work, your classrooms.
Yeah.
The services that you offer for Watts Willowbrook. So in that area and the surrounding areas, you know, you don't have to be on the road. You don't have to go to Santa Barbara.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the valley. That was my dream.
Yes.
I knew the struggles and difficulties that families had accessing services 50 miles away from their home, 100 miles. And so that opening that center in the heart of our community, across the street from the, you know,
MLK.
Historic, iconic MLK Hospital, meant everything. And I tell you, one of my therapist told me the other day that the kids call the center Disneyland, that they have so much fun, and it is like they're home away from home. They love to come. They have a hard time leaving when it's time to go. The parents love it, and it is such a great feeling. And you were at so many of these events where we were telling people, okay, next year.
Yes.
And whenever you build a project this large with you're doing it in conjunction with the County of Los Angeles, a big governmental entity. I give them a lot of credit for Mark Ridley Thomas was in office at the time at the county, and he saw the vision and helped us, you know, build this center that has served so many kids. At times it got a little rough. We didn't know if it was going to happen. Delays happened, but it is open now, and it is just exceeding all expectations. I have to tell you that we've opened many CAD centers now in Riverside, in Valencia, in Kern County.
Oh my
and this
goodness.
year we are slated to pilot a center in San Diego.
Wow, that's amazing. All because of the work of this woman here. I don't know where you get your energy. I think I've told you that many, many times, but that's where it starts. And one thing, you have your hands in everything that happens. I know that.
Yes.
You know, because you know this is what you want. This is the vision that you have, and you know that's what's necessary. It's got to make you feel like $1 million to hear kids say they thought they were at Disneyland.
Yeah, I tell you.
All right?
I mean, and something else that really warms my heart. We have about 500 employees now at SNN.
500.
500.
Now that is remarkable. That's grown. I remember going to Crenshaw.
Yes, you
Crenshaw
remember
Boulevard?
Crenshaw?
Yes.
We have 6 offices now around the state. Young people, Pat, 25, 22, starting their careers. I'll tell you this story. A young man started working with us. We have a job training program. He started his job training program. He grew up in East LA, got a scholarship to Harvard.
Wow.
Got to Harvard, had a real difficult time making the adjustment. While there, got diagnosed with some mental health issues, had to take time off, wasn't sure he was going to even get back there. After some time off, getting some therapy, getting him some good programs, he did get back, graduated. Graduated, didn't know what he was going to do. Had thought he was going to be pre-med, but realized that really wasn't, you know, what he wanted. Gets back to LA, just kind of meandering, not really taking advantage of that Harvard degree. Finds our job training program, goes through the job training program, now works for Special Needs Network, is a trainer, is in a master's program to become a speech and language pathologist, was on stage at a conference that we gave 2 weeks ago, talking to an audience of 400 people,
Amazing.
telling his story. So in addition to the kids on the spectrum that we get to serve, it is these young people, and you know, these indigenous leaders that we are bringing up, who are going to be leading in the field of behavioral health, who are going to be leading in the field of autism, because they came through Special Needs Network. And these aren't, you know, the kids that couldn't get jobs. I'm talking kids with degrees from Harvard
And that's saying
UCLA, and, you know, the best colleges in this country, who want to give back to their community, who want to do good while doing good. And that, I mean,
that's got to make you feel,
when I see
because that's your leadership also. You are the example. They wanted to follow. They could, like you say, they could have done anything.
Well, I am so blessed. I would be remiss if I did not mention the board of directors of Special Needs Network. I have some board members who have been riding with me from day one, dedicated, hardworking, show up, give their time, their talent, their treasure. Bonnie Berry Lamont, Sonia White, Rahel Cook, Dr. Anshu Batra, Randy Miller, Oscar Madrigal, Kim Whitley, who we recruited to be on the board, Alicia Jones, Tinsy Taylor, just
they're all
an amazing
women.
Group of women, a couple of guys who see the vision, some who have children who are neurodivergent, others who don't. But people who just have a passion for serving and giving back to their community, and they saw the vision that I saw when we were just a little engine that could, working in a cubicle out of my law firm with our 1 or 2 volunteer employees, to now having this impact all over the state. So I am so blessed to work with this incredible group of men and women, and then the staff, the team at SNN, just the hardest working folks you ever wanted to meet. I mean, who work at such a high level of excellence. And you said I have my hands in so much of Special Needs Network, and the reason I do that, Pat, is because one thing, when you grow up in these poor communities like the one I grew up in, there's this, I don't know, people think that poor people don't want what everybody else wants. Right. And they think that it's okay to treat us like second-class citizens.
Should be satisfied with
whatever. Hand-me-down, raggedy, dirty clothes. You don't have anything. How dare you want a new garment? How dare you want a clean, pressed garment? And so when I started SNN, I would always tell, and I do this to this day to staff, I want people that come to an SNN event to have the same experience they would have if they were in Beverly Hills, if they were on the West Side, if they were in the Valley. I don't want people to come to our events and feel like we just put this together. I want them to feel like we've thought about them and we care about them. And I know you're not poor because you chose to be, and I know if we help you, you could be whatever you want to be. And that was so important. That is so important to me.
But what's important too, since you mentioned it, at the Pink Pump events, you always have families come. And they tell their story. So here they are with people from all walks of life. A lot of people, they probably thought, well, I would never get to meet this individual. And it is first class. It is a good time for a good cause. Now, Ariva, let's get into the science a little bit. I know you do your own research, of course. We have heard many things. According to the CDC recently, I want to give some numbers. About 1 in 69 children were diagnosed with autism in 2012. In 2022, that number went up to 1 in 31 kids. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been, okay, I see that face. He's been very vocal.
Did I make a face?
Yeah, you did.
Let's try not to. Okay.
Yeah, I know it. But you know what? He pledged to find the cause by September. And he also said this.
These are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children, and we need to put an end to it.
You know, I have a podcast called The Special Report, and I needed to respond to these comments, these flat out inaccurate statements made by our Health and Human Services Secretary. So I did a 2-camera video first, and then on my podcast, The Special Report, I had a scientist, a neuroscientist from UCLA come on. I had a parent. I interviewed a professional baseball player on the spectrum. I interviewed a young man with 2 degrees from Loyola who worked for Special Needs Network for 3 years and who now is working in a family foundation come on, because it was important for us to debunk this disinformation, to set the record straight. The notion that by September, there's going to be some miraculous revelation of a cure for autism is just flat out wrong. It's gaslighting and it's dangerous. The scientists like Dr. Geschwin from UCLA and other top neuroscientists around this country have been studying the causes of autism. And I know this because Special Needs Network is in a partnership with UCLA in a genetic study that's been going on for a decade now, studying the causes of autism and this notion that it is an epidemic, that there's some toxin, and Kennedy says he didn't know it has to be something in the environment because when he was growing up, he didn't know anyone with autism. Well, I'm sorry, there were people with autism when you were growing up. Now, whether you knew it or not is on you.
Yeah.
But to suggest that this is something new, it's just so wrong in so many ways. And most importantly, it's so dangerous, Pat. We have come out of an era where parents, there was a theory called the refrigerator mom theory that posited that cold mothers who didn't hug their children enough caused autism. And that if you just hugged your child more, and if you were more loving and more nurturing, your child, yes. And for your audience, Google it, you'll find it. So when someone talks in the way that Robert F. Kennedy talks, it places the blame and it causes people, primarily parents, to start looking at themselves, wondering, well, what did I eat when I was pregnant? Where did I go? What did I, breathe? What air did I breathe? And that places the blame in the wrong place. And it takes away from the science. And the other thing we should note, at a time when he says he's going to tell us the cause in September, let's be real clear. The administration, the Trump administration, Robert F. Kennedy, they are cutting critical funding that's needed for autism research. So you cannot make the claim that you're going to find a cure at the time while you are firing the scientists and cutting the funding from those research institutions that are doing the real work to find cures and to provide support for individuals with autism. And all that laundry list of things that people with autism don't do, again, total ridiculous nonsense. Professional baseball players, actors, singers, people who are gainfully employed, who pay lots of taxes, people who go on dates, Love on the Spectrum, a whole Netflix series about people with autism dating. People with autism do everything that you and I do. They may do it differently. They may do it at different times in their lives. They may need different levels of support. But to suggest that they should be thought of differently, or somehow they are less than human, or they don't deserve the value that others deserve, it's just dangerous.
Have you reached out to his office?
We've written a letter.
Contact?
We have written to the department to voice our strong opposition to a lot of the cuts, to the programming, to voice our opposition to the way in which people with autism are being wrongfully characterized and maligned, how hurtful these stereotypes are, how difficult it will make it for people seeking employment that have autism, seeking relationships. Yes, we've been very vocal in our opposition.
How worried are you, Ariva?
Very.
I'm going to ask you that question. And then on the upside, what can we tell people? What can we tell families that gives them hope?
Very worried. They're talking about an autism registry, making individuals with autism give more of their personal information to a government that we already don't trust. That worries me. More cuts to those critical research projects and funding and services. The cuts to the education department, the wiping out of our education department. A lot of what that education department did was fund programs in schools for neurodivergent students. So what we can do, we've got to be vocal, Pat. We have to be more vocal than ever in terms of contacting our congressional leaders, our U.S. senators, our state, our local leaders, because they need to hear from us. People need, those in Washington, those that confirmed Robert F. Kennedy, those that have the power to control those programs need to know how harmful, what he is doing is, how harmful it is to our community, how harmful it is to families. and that we are not going to sit idly by on the sidelines. We're going to use our voices, we're going to use our votes, and we are going to demand better because people with autism deserve better.
Okay, I could talk to you for hours. We don't have that kind of time. But I do want to talk about the Ariva Martin, the civil rights attorney. You have dedicated really most of your adult life so far to special needs, but you're also fighting for people on another realm. Now, in Palm Springs recently, Section 14, you won a $5.9 million settlement reached with the city near the end of last year. So as a civil rights attorney, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing right here in the United States and even beyond?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that case. That was a historic victory. Those were families, black and brown families, burned out of their homes in the 1950s and 60s. People who had been fighting off and on over the last 60 years for justice, people who had been told that justice would forever be elusive, that there would be no opportunity for them to receive any kind of justice because their claims were so old, because so much time had passed, because they didn't have, what a lot of people believed was necessary in order for them to move forward. So very proud of the clients and the individuals that I had, again, the honor to represent. But a lot of my work, Pat, is representing individuals who have been the victims of sexual assault, individuals who've been wrongfully terminated, people who've been terminated because of their race, their age, their gender, representing people who've been severely injured by products or in, personal injury cases. So my civil rights practice is expansive. It's always representing victims who have suffered some kind of harm. And fear right now over what's happening at the federal level, the way that federal civil rights statutes that were enacted to protect marginalized groups, to protect minorities, are being distorted and being literally undermined. And there is real concerns about how we will continue to protect people's First Amendment rights, people's rights to not be discriminated against in the workplace, or not to be victims of violence by the police. Recent cases in the news, Tyree Nichols, the young man that we watched get beaten and murdered by police. 3 of those officers acquitted in their state court murder trial. Another officer in Michigan hung jury in a case where he shot an unarmed African-American man during a traffic stop. And I have to believe that these recent criminal cases, the verdicts in them, have a lot to do with what we're witnessing in this country, the backlash that we've seen since George Floyd's murder, and the reckoning, the racial reckoning that happened in this country, and now seeing the pendulum swing in the complete opposite direction, seeing people being attacked, Muslims being attacked, immigrants being attacked, people of color being attacked, the attacks on DEI, this notion that somehow diversity, equity, and inclusion is harmful to this country, rather than embracing it and recognizing that it makes this country better, that it makes companies better, that it improves the economic bottom line of companies. I was just at some of the events for the Milken Institute big conference, and one of the receptions I went to were, talking about how companies that have diverse asset managers and companies that have diverse, people involved in their financial management do better. So again, we are fighting a lot of disinformation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are fighting against those that would like to undo the progress we made during the civil rights movement, who would like to distort federal civil rights statutes, which are the bedrock of what I do as a civil rights lawyer. Those federal civil rights statutes are what we have used for decades to advance the rights of people who have been, locked out of our society, targeted, discriminated against. But even with all of that happening, I know you asked me, how am I finding hope? I'm finding hope when I see institutions, when I see law firms, when I see advocacy groups stand up, when they file lawsuits in court and people don't see this often, but most of the lawsuits that have been filed by attorneys general around the country challenging violations of people's due process rights, most of those lawsuits have been successful. So I'm encouraged by those people who will not bend, will not bow, and will not cower to an administration that seems dead set on taking us back to an era when we didn't have the rights and privileges that we enjoy in this country.
Ariva Martin, you're such a formidable woman.
Thank you, my friend.
I was going to say, glad to call you friend.
Oh, thank you.
When we'll have another conversation.
Yes.
We could have spent another hour just talking about civil rights alone.
I
And
know.
my question is when you're going to run for office.
Oh.
Okay. And
That conversation when we come back.
okay. And thank you for watching the conversation with Pat Harvey. Make sure to check your YouTube page for future episodes.